single mother. She was young. She was 18 when she had me. She was exactly 18. She'll always be exactly, what is it, 19 years older than me? Something like that. It wasn't always bad. It did get bad. But as early as I can remember, living with my mom wasn't always terrible. Now, I have made mention of being left in a pool of my own blood from a very young age, getting my head kicked through a wall, getting stabbed in the face with a pair of scissors, all these things like that. I've experienced so many things like that that I've literally just lost count. I have been getting I've been getting beat up for a few years. It's about as early as I can remember. Maybe as early as 7, 8 years old, 6. I'm not even sure. My mother was 5'3", and I was big when I was born. I was big for my age. I was big for a newborn. They had to cesarean her to get me out. I killed her twice. I accidentally, I mean, not accidentally, it's not like something I had any control of, but I did have a hand in my mother flatlining twice while she was giving birth to me. And so from a very young age, I was big for all, for the grade I was in. I was bigger than most kids. I was taller. I think she said I had a full head of hair, and I had a tooth coming in already. So breastfeeding me was extremely painful. But yeah, I remember being bigger than everybody. I remember being taller. I was always skinny. That was always something that's it was present ever since I was young. But I was taller than most people all the way up to about the sixth grade. Then everybody else caught up to me, and I stopped. I stopped growing, and it would just be my luck that I would turn out to just be more of a smaller, medium-sized build for most of my life. But my mom never worked, as far as I can remember. She never had a job. I never had to be babysitted. It seemed like she was always in the house, never had to go anywhere. She had some type of checks coming every month. I don't know if it was. I know some of it was. Uh, what did they call it? Welfare. Some of it was welfare. I think some of it might have been disability. But we were paid just enough. I know that much. Just enough to make rent. Just enough to cover all the essential bills. Give me a bunch of couple weeks worth of ramen, mac and cheese, Kool-Aid, cereal. I was actually in charge of the food that was in the house. She had gotten an EBT card, and because she knew how she was, she made me set the password for the EBT card. And I'm like 8, 9 years old, figuring this out. So I didn't know what else to, you know, I didn't know what else to make for the pin other than the digits for my first name. And I was the one that would pedal my ass all the way to High V and Pomida. Those are some old school store names right there. I don't know how many people out there actually remember that. But I would be pedaling my ass to these stores, and I'd be coming back with grocery bags on each side of the handlebars. And it was always difficult because when you start swerving and the bags get to swing in, and then they start rubbing against the tire, and then the plastic, it breaks, and then all your food pops out and stuff, and it's a pain in the ass. So yeah, I was the one who went and got food. I had to worry about feeding myself from a very young age. She pretty much flat out told me for as early as I could start to reason. Now, pardon the interruption, but I get distracted on a whole nother tangent here. But what I was going to say was that my mother had always said she would provide the money for the bills. I would have to take care of the house and divide up the money to pay the bills in the times that they had to be paid. She always felt like she was teaching me responsibility. And she could trust me to not kill, to not hurt myself or burn the house down in her absence when she would leave to go party for the weekend or whatever. I remember this much. I always had food, and I always had anything a kid could want at that age. But she always had drinking money. No matter what, there was always enough money for her to always have beer every single day. That's what she was. She was a drunk. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while now, you would know that something very drastic happened at the very start of my infancy. Something pretty heinous. She was ultimately held hostage over a period of days, and she was brutally and viciously attacked and, graped. She was graped with the G over a period of days, and a it was such a vicious degree of it that took place over this period of time that as a result of it, she would never be able to have more kids. That's how bad they had messed her up. I don't know if that was just the damage or if they, I never got her to explain to me, and I never asked because I was only with her up until I was about 10 years old, and you don't ask these kind of questions. You don't understand, I didn't understand a lot of the things that she told me. It was only as I got older, 16, 17, 18 years old, that I would have flashbacks, and I'd be like, damn, I know what she's talking about now. you know but yeah, and I had to piece most of what her history was together over the course of the years that I was woken up in the middle of the night, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, hours before I had to get up for school, because she was drunk and she wanted to reminisce and get the crying jags and all that, and come wake me up and make me sit with her in the middle of the night and just listen to her tell me stuff that I was way too young to hear. But she made damn sure that I knew that men were responsible for what had happened to her. And I was a man. I would grow to be a man. I would grow to be the very thing that she ultimately despised and hated to the very depths of her blackened heart. And even at that age, I understood enough to know that what they had done to her, it was bad. And I did feel bad. I did feel like, I shared the blame somehow because I had something swinging between my legs. That was something that she had told me many, many times, whether she thought it was me, her actual son, or if she thought she was talking to a grown man that had, you know, wronged her in some way. And she was hallucinating and thinking that I was that man because I was as tall as her, if not taller at one point. but She had meds that she was supposed to take. And I never did figure out if what would occur and when I would end up getting, you know, beat up was a result of her mixing her meds with her medication or a result of her not taking her meds and getting drunk and high for days on end or what, you know. I never did figure it out. I just knew that there was two sides to my mom. There was an actual nurturing mother side, and then there was this crazy ass, gangster ass person that referred to themselves in the third person, who called themselves Kimmy Cat. And Kimmy Cat didn't recognize me as her son. She didn't have a son. She was vengeance, vengeance on man incarnate. That's what she was. That's how this person had saw themselves, this other side of my mother. And she was capable. She was capable of inflicting some damage. She was a black belt in Taekwondo. And she taught me from a very young age that you had to learn to take an ass whooping long before you could ever give one. But the whole process was definitely a cycle, right? It was a cycle that constantly repeated itself. She would get drunk for days on end, going on a bender, and then once all the party friends and everybody all filtered out and they all kind of went off to the next party or whatever, and it would just be me left with her in the house alone. Sometimes there'd be people there, and they wouldn't do anything. They wouldn't step in. They wouldn't stop her. They wouldn't say, "Hey, chill out. He's just a kid." Nothing like that. It wasn't their, you know, not their monkey, not their circus. And a lot of them, they just bit their tongue. They bit their tongue, and they kept their head down, and they didn't say shit. Especially when this woman is capable of beating their ass if they wanted to. She could beat grown men's asses. I've seen her do it. I was in the bar with her all the time. All the bars in Vermilion, South Dakota knew me very well. As soon as I would come in, they would immediately pull out a little basket of breaded chicken gizzards, Tabasco sauce, and a thing of lemonade. And I was a regular. It was either that or a manwich. And I would be off over playing pool by myself or on the pinball machines or throwing darts. I was definitely a regular. I was allowed to come into all the pubs with my mom in all this little small town, little bar scene. But she'd get drunk, shit would happen, and suddenly out of nowhere she would remember there's a man in the house. Not her son, just some figure that she could take some frustrations out on. And she did. And when she would obviously have no recollections of this the next morning. And I would usually have some kind of markings, black eye, puffy cheek, fat lip, split lip, something. There was always something wrong with me the next day. And then she would have no recollection of it. And she would, come in there to check on me, to ask me what do I want to do for lunch, or do I want to go walk with her on an errand to get more brewskis and catch a movie, maybe pick up a pizza or whatever it is. And then she'd see me and she'd immediately be like, what happened? Who did this to you? Tell me who did this to you. I'll kill him, blah, 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 blah. And I'd have to tell her time and time again, you did this. And it was always the same. She'd get deeply, deeply upset. She'd cry, she'd bawl, she'd beg for my forgiveness. She'd tell me that I am the most important thing to her and she would never do that. I have to believe her. It wasn't her. And that it caused a lot of inner turmoil, because you want to be mad at this person. You want to be like, fuck you. Get the fuck away from me, you piece of shit. But this is like the only person you know. You can't say crazy shit like that to the only person that you really know and love, and that's like your whole world. You're gonna swallow it. You're gonna swallow that shit down, and it's gonna go nowhere. It's gonna turn inward, and it's gonna poison. But I had, as early as at least 8 years old, I had my own TV. I had my own VCR. I had the Nintendo, the Super Nintendo, the Sega. I had Nike Air Pumps. I had a whole closet full of toys. I had a BMX bike, a Schwinn Phantom. I had skateboards. I had rollerblades, all the He-Man sets. I mean, literally everything. Some other stuff too. Called, what were they? Battletoads, Battle Frogs, something like that. Like I had even Primal Rage, the video game. I even had the action figures from that video game. Like I had all the toys, all of it, every single piece of it was as a result of my mom's guilt. And I just kind of always knew after I'd get my ass beat, I was going to get something new. I was going to get something that I wanted. And that was okay with me. That was the exchange. You know what I mean? It's like I gotta put up with a little bit of violence and bloodshed here and there, but I would get rewarded, and everything would be okay, and everything would go back to normal, and I'd probably have a week of peace in which she attempted to be a good mom again. But what had happened to her had broken her mind. It had split it in two, compartmentalized. And what one personality knew, the other personality wouldn't. It's like there was two completely different people that I had to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And this went on, like I said, from a very early age. I remember one particularly violent night. I was in the kitchen, I was on the linoleum, and she was just stomping me, kicking me, calling me somebody else's name, some man. Steve, Mike, I don't even know. Joe Dara. I remember some guy she called Joe Dara. I don't know, some boyfriend most likely, long before I can even remember. But I remember getting the shit stomped out of me. And like I was getting kicked, my head was getting stomped, I was getting kicked in the groin, I was getting kicked in the kidneys, the stomach, like I was getting stomped like a grown man. And she was telling me that all I ever did was think with you know, my peace. That's all I was worried about, was getting my peace wet. And like I said, I had no idea what she was saying to me. It would be a long time before that particular memory would come. It would come rising to the top from the black depths of memories like an air bubble. And suddenly I would remember, and I'd be like, damn, I know what she meant now. And for the most part, she's probably true. you know, most guys probably are worried about, you know, scoring. Who isn't? What guy doesn't want to, you know, indulge in some of these carnal sins that are so popular? But I didn't know what she was talking about. But I remember laying there in a lot of blood, and I was thinking to myself, this is a lot of blood. I don't think this much is supposed to be out of the body. you know, like this. This probably means I'm going to bleed to death, and maybe as early as 6, 7 years old, I remember thinking it would be a relief because I wouldn't have to deal with this anymore. Whatever this was, whatever I had done to deserve it, whatever it is that is tormenting my mom, I was like, it's this has got to be better. This has got to be better than what I have now. But I ended up learning from a very young age. You can get put through a lot. You can experience a lot of pain. You can experience a lot of physical damage. And you can bleed quite a bit and survive. So that was one of the first and most important lessons that my mom had imparted on me as the 50-50 balance that she tried to establish, half my mom, half the disciplinarian. Now, I used to be a bit of a crazy kid. Yeah, I had some issues. Who wouldn't? you know, who wouldn't in a situation like that? One particular time, and I remember one instance in particular where I knew right away, I knew something was wrong. Um, I was kind of socially awkward from a very young age. In fact, I will go as far as to say I was slow. And I have my own theories on the things that happened that caused me to, you know, pick up faster. Because I see a lot of people seem to think that I have a high intellect. That's nothing that I've ever come out and said, "Hey, I'm smart. I'm smart. I'm intelligent." I've said it in instances where I was offended that that somebody would think that I would say something that's stupid. It's like, no, I'm smarter than that. You give me some fucking credit, but no, I've never come out there and just said, yeah, I'm extremely intelligent. that sounds that sounds terrible just saying it. Just saying it like that and looking at myself while I say it, I'm like, holy fuck, that's terrible. But a lot of people do think that I'm smart. And I have taken IQ tests. You're going to take some IQ tests as a ward of the state. And I did score higher than average. But I think you tend to lose that as you get a little older. That was around 18, not 18, 19, something like that. but when I was younger, I was kind of slow. I was the last to get the joke. I'd laugh before I even understood what was funny. You know, People were hard to read. Kids my own age were hard to read. They didn't have the same problems I had. The things they worried about weren't the things that I had to worry about. So we never got along really well. For the most part, I think, they tolerated me, my peers, but they knew enough to know that I was a little different, and they left me alone. I was an outcast from a very young age. And I find it remarkable that I don't have short hair right now, which is, I've always had short hair all the way up until I started this channel, and I just let it grow for some reason. It was just something. I have no idea why I grew it, but I'm gonna cut it. I'm gonna cut it soon here. But I used to have long hair then. Long hair, braided, bandana, at my mom's behest. She was very traditional. She wanted me to be traditional. She wanted me to be proud of our culture. And Native American men are supposed to have long hair. It's a sign of their strength. But all I knew is I got called girl, sissy. It started more fights than any amount that I've ever been in prison. You know, I just wanted to be normal. That's all I wanted. You know, But I had to stick out in so many different ways at school. I always had to be the one showing up, bruises, whispers, accusations, silent accusations. I had to explain why I had the same clothes on multiple days in a row, because I didn't go home. I went with my mom straight to some party and slept on a couch and just went back to school the next day wearing what I already had. Stuff like that. But I'll never forget this kid. His name was Joey. And Joey wasn't particularly an asshole or anything, or even a bully, right? He kept to himself. He was a little bit more shyer. Um, but for whatever reason, he was emboldened one day as I was out at recess with the kickball. And what I would do is I would go to the far end of the playground and I would kick the ball against the wall. And if you can picture that, if you can picture how how isolated and fucking sad that looks to see a whole playground, a jungle gym full of kids running and playing together, and I'm the only one far off by myself, alienated from my own kids my own age, and I'm kicking the ball. It hit the wall and it would roll back, and I'd stop it. And I'd kick it again. Boop. And boop. It'd come rolling back to me. And I'd stop it and I'd kick it again. And I was content to do this. I don't know, maybe the whole period if they let me. But while I had kicked the ball, it hit the wall and it was on its way back. And I remember looking over and I seen Joey. He was hauling ass, just come cruising. And he had intersected the ball as it was on its way bouncing back to me. And I remember he just wound up and he booted it. Boom! And it went sailing. And I watched it, and I watched it bounce, and it went rolling way off, way the fuck off in the corner. I mean, way off into Never Land. And I looked at Joey and I said, "Are you gonna go get that?" And he just laughed, just ha 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 ha, like literally just laughed right in my face, and took off the other direction. And I don't know what it was, but I just something in me snapped. And this is the first time. This is the first time. This happened to be what third or fourth grade that this happened. We're all like maybe 8 years old, something like that. I chased after him, right? And he's fast. And I'm just keeping up with him. I'm like 5, 6 feet behind him everywhere. We're going all the way down, went all the way down one end of the fucking playground, came all the way back, went up the jungle gym, down the slides, through the swing sets, and I'm just chasing him, and he's laughing. But he's starting to slow down. And the whole time, everybody's watching us, and the teachers are out there. They think we're playing tag or something. They're just laughing, and they're just watching us play. He thinks it's a game, but it's not. And I'm just waiting to catch him. That's it. I'm gonna hurt him. I'm gonna hurt him bad because he kicked my ball. And finally, he started to slow down. And when he slowed down, I caught up to him and I kicked the back of his right leg so it would clip the back of his left. And when he went down, he hit, and he hit hard. Boom! And he slid and rolled. And I remember having to jump over him so that I wouldn't trip over him. And when I jumped over him and I landed and I came to a stop and I turned back around and I immediately started putting the boots to him. And I mean bad. I stomped his head. I kicked him right in the stomach. All the air came out. I knew it would do that to him because it was done to me. I knew how to hurt him. because I had already experienced these things at a very young age. I kicked him square right in, right between the legs from behind because he was laying in the fetal position. I made sure I angled the tip of my foot right up in there, kicked him in the back, right where the kidneys are. Like, I'm young, and I already know where to hurt somebody. And I stomped this kid down so bad and so viciously that I remember after the teachers ran over and tackled me and got me off of him, they picked me up and they had my arms behind me like this and they started marching me across the playground. They're taking me to the counselor's office. And I remember I was just seeing red at that time. And when it started to, you know, lower, I noticed that there was kids crying on the playground. Kids, little girls and boys, whoever was, you know, within eye shot of what had happened, literally started crying because they had never seen nothing like that. They didn't understand it. It scared them. I'll always remember that. And Joey didn't deserve that. And I remember they took me into the counselor's office and they sat me down and the counselor was like, "What what happened?" And I said, "Man, I was out there. I said I was playing by myself. I was kicking the ball against the wall, and Joey ran over and he kicked my ball. And I asked him if he was going to get it. I was like, yeah." He laughed in my face and he ran. And I chased him. And she was like, "And why did you chase him down and hurt him like that?" And I was like, "Because." And she was like, "Because." I was like, "He kicked my ball." And she was like, "Stop right there." She's like, "Do you hear yourself? Say it again." I said, "He kicked my ball." And she said, "Does that make sense to you?" She's like really asking. She's genuinely curious. And I remember thinking about it and I'm like, it made sense at the time. But now that I'm sitting here and I'm telling her, it feels hollow. It feels flat, you know. And I realized I can't really account for what had just happened. I just know that something happened that pissed me off and I reacted. And now I'm dealing with the aftermath. Those are the gifts from my mother. That's what she taught me. Now, at some point in time, in the midst of all this ass beating, my mom would go from absolute conviction and certainty that she had never laid a hand on me. And I suppose to a certain degree, she's telling the truth because she, as her normal self, her actual sober, present self, maybe she wouldn't lay a hand on her son's head. But this other woman that she harbored definitely would. And she had a hard time coming to terms with that. But finally, a day had come where she had decided one day that she was going to teach me to fight. And always remember the day that she did it because I was in my room and I was playing my video games. This was usually my safe spot, so long as she was in her room and she had her brewskis and she had a little bit of bud and her soap operas were on. This was like a safe time. I could expect to have a normal day when everything was in order like that. There were certain times where I knew I had to be quiet or stay unseen. But that's hard to do because she always used to scream my name at the top of her lungs every time she wanted another beer. And to this day, anytime I hear somebody scream my name like that, it gives me shivers because it reminds me of her. But she came into my room one day, and like I said, she has two two modes to her, right? She's either the iron fist or she's the velvet glove, right? And I remember one day she came into my room, and I always look at her, and right away I can usually tell, I can usually gauge about where she's at in her buzz, and I would consider this point what I would call the twilight, right before it gets dark, but it's still kind of light out. That was where her mood was, and it could go either way. It could really go either way. But she would remember what's happening at this point. I know that much. So she came into my room one day, and I'm looking at her, and I'm trying to think: is she the iron fist or the velvet glove today? And she's looking at me, and I'm sitting cross-legged with my remote control in my hands, and I'm looking up at her, and she said, "Get up, square up." And so I jumped up, right, and I plant my feet, and I'm standing there like this with both my arms hanging down. And she walks around me, right? She does this little lap, kind of looking at me and stuff. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she gets down and she repositions my feet, kind of aggressively too. She's like this, right? She says it like we've been at this for an hour already. I'm like, okay, she's the iron glove today. She's like this. She puts one of my right foot backward, back a little bit more, puts my left up, and she started teaching me about the taekwondo strikes, right? How the what is it? Yeah, left fist is down, right fist is up, facing upward like this, and so when you strike, it rotates, so it stops outward, and when it comes back, you turn it back in. It's like this. And then she also taught me to hit with these two knuckles. Make sure they're flat with the whole length of your arm, and that they're in line with the forearm. And that's how you hit, with those two knuckles straight on. Lessons were simple at first, right? Literally throwing strikes, punches, kicks. But she had a lot that she could teach me, and she did teach me for a few years. But on some level, she knew that she was whooping my ass when she couldn't remember. And I guess this was her way in trying to ensure that I would be able to defend myself when she wasn't herself. It wasn't always bad. She did a lot of hilarious shit. We kind of ended up meeting somewhere in between, right? She was supposed to be the adult, but she was actually the child. And I was the child, but I was actually the adult. And somehow that kind of it evened out, right? The difference between the two kind of made us meet in the middle. We were kind of like teenagers together. She would do stuff like, pull her legs back and just her underwear on, and light a fart on fire. She was the first one who showed me that. Woof. The most hilarious shit I had ever seen. I immediately had to try it right after that. I was like, let me try. It was hilarious. She was a big kid at heart. She had gotten her innocence taken from her too. She never got to be a kid either. And she resented me a lot for stealing her youth. I remember being told that before in the midst of all these ass whoopings and getting whipped around by my hair and kneed in the face and my head kicked into the wall and all types of shit. She'd tell me, "You stole my youth. You ruined my body. You know, what happened to me only happened to me because I was looking for a father for you." These are some of the things that I was told long, long before I knew the seriousness. You know, I was told these things, and I just bottled it up, saved it away for a rainy day when I could pull it back out, puzzle over it, wonder what it means. Is it something that I am guilty of, or how much of this do I really have coming? There was times where I was a crazy kid and I did some stupid shit, you know. But I would say about 80% of the physical violence I experienced was was just being alone with her when I shouldn't have. When she finally did lose custody of me, I was 10 years old. And at that time, I was taller than her. So she was like, what, 5'3". I must have been 5'3", 5'4", 5'5", something like that. I was taller than her. She weighed more than me. She was still about 125, 130 pounds. She was still fit. She was muscular, strong. But, she had a big scar down her stomach, and she had a lot of leftover stretch marks that she was very ashamed of. And yeah, we finally got into it. I had finally had enough. And I remember one day I was in the kitchen and I was cooking myself some food. I remember I was getting the pots and pans down. I was getting the water ready. I think I was boiling some water or something, and I was still digging around for something in the top cupboards. And you ever have, I know there's probably other people out there that know exactly what I mean, but do you ever just know by the way your father or your mother is walking, the way that their footprints sound, their footsteps, just from the way that their footsteps sound, you know there's about to be some bullshit, right? I'm pretty sure there's other people out there that know exactly what I mean when I say that. Well, that's exactly what I heard. It was a very, like, the heel hits hard and heavy, but fast and quick succession, right? And I heard that coming down the hallway. And before she even got all the way around the corner and started, made a beeline towards me over by the end of the kitchen, I already knew something was up. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was something I did. I don't know if this is Kimmy Cat or if it's my mom or what. I just know there's about to be some shit. Yeah, when she came around the corner, she made a beeline towards me. I remember I dropped whatever it was I had and I turned towards her and I squared up. And immediately she started firing on me, right? Bam, bam. I'm taking these hits, but I'm trying to put my arms up and I'm just trying to deflect them. And I'm backing up. And I remember she grabbed a hold of my hair. I had long hair. I had hair down to my ass at this time. And she had long hair too. Well, she grabbed my hair and she pulled my head down. And I remember I caught some of her hair too. And so we both have each other by the hair. We're holding each other. We're holding both of our heads down. And I remember she was trying to hit me, right? She was trying to reach up and hit me. And I remember I was just holding on. I was holding on, and she was like, fuck. She's like, you better let me go. She's like, you better fucking let me go right now. She's like, I swear to God, this and that. And I said, all right. So I'm going to let you go. I said, are you going to behave? Are you going to behave? You know, and I'm like 10 years old asking a 30-year-old woman if she is going to behave, you know? And she was like, or yeah, she was like 28, 29, something like that. I'm 10 years old, and I remember I was asking her, I said, are you going to behave? I'm going to let you go. I said, all right, I'm going to let you go. And because she kept trying to like trip me. She was trying to do everything right, but I had her by her hair. She had me by my hair. And I said, all right. I said, I'm going to let you go on the count of three. I said, all right. I said, you let go, I'll let go. I said, one, two. And just as I got to two, I remember she reached up and she actually got me twice right in the face. Bam, bam. And I was like, fuck, this is it. I was like, fuck it. And I had her head with both of my hands. Right? I had my hands in her hair. And I remember lifting her head up, and I stepped to the side of her and I rotated her whole body over my hip. She had taught me hip throws, right? The whole, the whole concept of tipping somebody, tripping them, off balance, off foot, stuff like that. Like she taught me a lot of those stuff like that. So I knew how to toss her, and I did. I remember I stepped to the side and I rotated her over my hip and I threw her at the same time. And when she rolled over me and she went down, she hit head first. Boom! Hard as hell. I knew it. I knew it. I heard it. I saw it, and I know exactly what had happened. And I was like, oh fuck. I just I just flopped my fucking mom. And she was rolling around on the ground and she was holding her head and she had her eyes closed and she was like, fuck Buck. She's like, you better be gone by the time I get up. And I was like, you do not have to tell me twice. I jetted down that fucking hallway. I ran all the way to the fucking living room. I hit that fucking door. I'm unlocking everything. I'm sliding the chains and everything, right? Like I couldn't have been more on or more accurate on that day. It was like I felt like if I had faltered for even a fraction of a second, she was going to get me. And I could hear her coming down the hallway as I'm struggling with this door. I finally throw the front door open. There's about 12 steps all the way down, and then it's a screen door. It's just, not a screen door, but just like a regular metal, you know, entry shed door, whatever. Not a shed door, but it was an entry screen door. I jumped down and I hit that push bar at the same time, and I threw it open. And I came running out and I grabbed my bike and I whipped it up and I landed on the wheels and I started running with it and I jumped and I remember I missed the pedals and I boom, I fucking nutted myself on the top bar, right? But my front lawn is downhill and so is the street going down. So I'm still going and I'm getting my feet on the pedals and I can hear her. She throws that screen door open and she's running barefoot. And I get down off the lawn onto the street and I get on my feet on the pedals and I pull that bike up into a wheelie. And I don't know why I thought that would make me go faster, but I'm like, I'm out of here. I started pedaling hard as shit and I can hear her feet slapping the ground behind me. Plap, 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 plap. And I'm just pedaling, right? I'm pedaling my ass off. And I feel like any second I'm going to feel her grab my shirt, my hair, or something. But I started hearing her footsteps get, quieter and quieter, further and further back. I didn't even look back. I just kept going. I was gone. I ran away to one of her friend's house, one of her party buddies. And he was somebody who had seen it. He did, he would, and has stopped her before. He had gotten in between her and me on a number of occasions. And I remember one time he had stopped her from beating my ass for something. I don't even remember. It was something that I didn't even do or what. I think she was just mad. And I don't even know. These happened so many different times, but I remember he was pulling me away from her, and he was like, go in the house, I got her, don't even trip. And while he was pulling me backwards, She reached out and she tried to claw me down the face. She did. She clawed me down the face. I have just the slightest discoloration somewhere right here, and one that went all the way down my nose. And those scars were there for years, you know. And she was sober enough to remember that one. She wasn't Kimmy Cat when she did that. But I went down to his place, and he's not a a potential lover or whatever. He was, he was a little weak at the wrist, and that's why I trusted him. He was just kind of like one of my mom's girlfriends, party buddy. But I knew that he would do something. I knew that much, and that's why I went to him. And he did do something. He did what he was supposed to have done, and that was put a stop to what was my life up to that point. He called the social services. I had been missing for a couple of days by that point. And when the social services showed up to his house, I knew the gig was up. The jig was up. And they had gotten everything they needed to take me from her, because they had told me that they had already talked to my mom, and my mom had already told them to tell me that they knew everything and to go with them, and pretty much just whatever, right? I don't really remember too much of the whole situation. It just felt like I was going back to her. They told me they were taking me back to her, and they already knew what happened and some other stuff like that. So I got in the car with them. They take me with them to the social services building, and that was the start of my entry into foster homes. Before that, I bounced around in a couple like temporary housing facilities for minors that have nowhere else to go. It's kind of like a halfway house, group home kind of setting. I don't know. They weren't meant for long term, which I was. You're probably wondering where my dad was in all this. My dad didn't know I existed until I was sent to the foster homes. When I was sent to the foster homes and my mom lost permanent custody, she knew enough to know that she would never get me back, and so she found my dad, convinced him that she actually had a son of his that she had kept from him for 10 years, and that he needed to come and get me. And he did. He dropped everything he was doing, and him and his wife, his newly wedded wife, came and they found her wandering drunk in an alleyway. And they got her home and gave her some coffee, sobered her up, and then he wanted to know, where's my son? You sent a picture with somebody. They found me. Where's my son? And he got me. By the time I was 11 years old, I only spent like a year and some change in the foster homes, and it was a good foster home. I was with a white family in Centerville, South Dakota, and it was like it was something else, man. It was. I'll do an episode on that some other time, but it was a good home. It was a good family. What's good, people? It's your boy White Eyes with Finally Free from Federal. If you made it this far, do me a favor, leave a like, drop a comment. Let me know if there's anything that you can relate to and all that craziness. I know that some people, probably not everybody's going to believe that. It seems gratuitous, right? That's just a peek. That's literally all it is. I literally just cracked the door and let you guys peeked in to what is literally all I can remember of my childhood. It's not for the faint of heart. There's some other crazy stuff that happened. I watched my mom attempt her own life twice. And I saved her both times. Those would be their own videos. But yeah, like I said, I watched her fight grown men. I've seen groups of women come over to attack her because she slept with her man and this and that or whatever, you know. And I'd just be sitting in my room and I'd be hearing all this straight cat fight going down, right? Just shit getting knocked over and broken and shattered, and I could just hear this person referring to themselves in the third person saying, "Yeah, fuck that. Give me go. Give me cat. Don't play that. Blah 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 blah. That's right, bitch. That's right. You better run." you know, and then it would just get quiet, man, and it would just be my mom left, and I'd finally come out, and she's sitting there drinking a beer, shirt ripped, hair everywhere, hair on the floor. You know, like that was my life. That was our life, and it's no way for a kid to grow up at all. No way for a kid to grow up at all. I was in YCC on my way to becoming a young adult. By the time I had some serious breakthroughs and realized that I was on my way to becoming a serial killer, I had all the what do they call it? Indicators. I had all the indicators. It was like textbook, right? Textbook description of the type of lives that these people had in the beginning. Deeply disturbing. The difference is that once you see it, once you become aware of it, once you understand it, once you come to that realization one day that your mom isn't the boogeyman from your childhood, she was just a woman. She was just like any other woman that I have met over the years. And it's like when you realize that, when you become an adult and you look back and you realize that this chick went through a lot of shit. She got dealt an extremely bad hand, and she was left to raise a child on her own, and she did it. She managed. you know, like, as batshit crazy as she was, she did what she was supposed to do. She did instill respect in me, manners, like proper etiquette for a lot of things. Like I said, for the people that have been around for a while, they know that I did everything I was supposed to do at that time for myself. And it wasn't until I had all this overlording parental guidance that I completely bucked the system, right? But yeah, I just wanted to give you guys a little sign off. I know the video just would have just abruptly stopped, but I'm not really, I'm not much to me, the guy who could easily talk for an hour. I'm not much for the beginning and end formalities. It's like I have what I got to say, and that's usually it. If somebody wants to add to it, then cool. But when it's just me talking, and I just and it's like that's as much as I'm willing to share at this point. It would just cut off, and I would be fine with that. But then it feels kind of funny, And I noticed some people were like, "That's kind of an abrupt ending," It's like, yeah, my bad. But yeah, I got a lot more stories that I'll be sharing here. Because ultimately, although I am a part of the prison YouTube genre, this isn't just strictly prison channel. It's just a channel about me. I just happen to be locked up most of my life. But I hope everybody had an amazing Christmas and an even better New Year. A lot to be thankful for. I'll see you guys soon. Take it easy.